It's August 2002. Well, it isn't if you're watching this video in the month that it comes out. It's
February
2026, but it's a literary device. Go with it. And the K family have gone on holiday to Abergavenny. On one day, when my brother and my sister went fishing with Dad, I went shopping with Mum. During this trip, I ended up buying something that would form an obsession for the next few years of my life. This. Well, not exactly this one. I bought the blue one first, but I've since sold that. This is the oldest one I still have. This video is about Bionicle. Launching in 2001, Bionicle was a toy line from LEGO. The series consisted of constructible action figures using elements from the Technic line, with several of the early toys focusing on incorporating gear functions and elastic band operated mechanisms. It wasn't LEGO's first go at building action figures, nor their first story-driven theme, but it was by far the most successful up to that point, with 10% of their turnover in 2001 attributed to Bionicle. Using various mediums to communicate the story, Bionicle initially focused on 6 heroes, the Toa, each with their own elemental powers, who wash ashore on a strange island. They learn they are revered heroes to the native Matoran, and must do battle with the evil Makuta to awaken Matanui, the great spirit who is the namesake of the island. Bionicle hit at the perfect time for me. The Jerry Anderson shows were being repeated on the BBC, bringing me into the world of sci-fi. The Phantom Menace made me a Star Wars fan, instilling a love of robotic characters, and Robot Wars demonstrating the joy of said robots tearing each other to shreds. Star Wars was also the reason that I was into LEGO, that old blocky Naboo starfighter being my first set. I still have my droid fighter from the same year, almost all the original pieces and almost all of them intact. A new LEGO theme with superpowered robots who could be rebuilt into even bigger superpowered robots was right up my street, at least until 2005 when something else came along to take over my life. Bionicle lasted until 2010 with myriad cast and location changes along the way, but the first 3 years set on the island of Matanui always felt particularly special. The world felt so fleshed out and believable, if not necessarily realistic, in a way that wasn't always the case in later years. So that's what we're doing today, going back through the first 3 years of Bionicle and trying to work out what made the story so good, other than personal nostalgia on my part, that is. Let's get started. So a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to be focusing mainly on the bits of the Bionicle story that I had access to as a child. There are a few bits of the story that I never had when I was young, such as the Game Boy Advance game, and we'll also not be talking about anything at a great disconnect from the main story, like the PC game, despite the fact that I had that one. Secondly, we won't be focusing too much on the toys in this video. That may seem a little odd when we're discussing a toy line, but Bionicle didn't work quite the same as other LEGO themes. With themes like Castle, or even a story-led theme like Adventurers, the characters were portrayed by ordinary LEGO minifigures. They're fun and charming, and I have way too many of them, but being so small in uniform they can't portray much of a story by themselves, with your ordinary LEGO system set normally including either some scenery or vehicle to enable play. Being built out of LEGO Technic pieces, the Bionicle characters are much larger, much more detailed, much more posable, even if they don't have elbows or knees, and they have action features built in. Once complete, they're more akin to action figures, with their robotic designs helping to disguise their constructible nature. In addition, while the main builds of each toy were similar, small variations across the designs helped to suggest character traits in a way you couldn't with LEGO minifigures. Vehicles do sometimes appear in Bionicle sets, although very infrequently. And environment builds didn't exist at all until Bionicle got some system sets of its own later down the line, excluding this boulder that you got a Pahatu. The characters you could hold in your hand, but the world only existed in the story. LEGO decided to use various mediums to tell the story of Bionicle. These days the theme may get its own TV show to promote the toys, but around the turn of the millennium that wasn't a done thing. Instead, comics told the story of the Toa. McDonald's Happy Meals contained small promotional sets and mini-comics, although not in the UK I believe, which was frustrating to say the least. And the LEGO website contained the biographies of all the characters, as well as a flash game exploring the island. The key release to tell the story was a PC game, planned to release late in 2001 and advertised in issues of the comic. In the first year, the comics told the most straightforward story, opening with Kopaka's canister coming ashore. Mirroring the canisters that the toys came in, ignore for a second that this is from a later line. The first 3 issues depict the 6 Toa, Tahu, Gali, Liwa, Pahatu, Anua and Kopaka, meeting each other, their early attempts to find a Kanohi mass of power, and battles with some of the Rahi, wild beasts under the Makuta's control with infected Kanohi masks. It's simple, but it's visually interesting. It's basically a superhero comic featuring snarky, not-quite robots. The key attraction for me is seeing these colourful robot-adjacent things contrasted with the idyllic setting of the natural world. It's an interesting contrast that did actually get explained about 7 years later. Interestingly, the comic storyline ends in a very open manner, as if setting up more stories to come. The 4th issue would start the following year's storyline, leaving the story unfulfilled if you only read these. clearly the comics were leaving space for the eventual PC game. Meanwhile, the Matanui Online game took a different approach. You didn't play as any of the mighty Toa, you played as this guy, waking up with no memories and free to explore the island. The online game starts you on Tawahi's beach, with only a Toa canister ahead of you and footsteps leading you off into the distance. The game slowly eases you into the world of Matanui. There's music present, but it's atmospheric and sounds reverential, particularly as you see a visual retelling of Matanui the Great Spirit's history, him being put to sleep by his brother Makuta and the Toa's arrival. Moreover, the music only comes in at certain moments, being absent for large chunks of gameplay. Stand on Tawahi's beach and you'll hear the wind and the sea. Head to the charred jungle and you'll hear snapping twigs underfoot and sinister growls. Talk with village elder Taraga Vakama and you'll hear what seems to be a blazing inferno behind him. It all draws you in, helps this world feel more natural than you may expect for a LEGO toy line. The choice to keep the characters silent with their dialogue as text works well too. For one, it must have made localization a doddle, but for two, it allows the player to create their own voice in their head. It's also consistent with everything else. Obviously there's no one reading out the comic's dialogue for you as you go, unless you've paid a bunch of voice actors to recite it, in which case fair play. And the commercials and mini-films for the website all had the characters utter not a single syllable, only the narrator speaking.
On the island of Matanui, 6 mighty Toa must rise against evil.
If you're not familiar with the world of Bionicle, you may notice I'm using the word Matoran to describe the villagers of the world, whereas the game's dialogue you may see on screen uses the word Tohunga. A lot of characters and places are named after words from various Polynesian languages. The original story document talks about this. The terminology of the adventure is firmly rooted in the language and mythology of the Polynesians, from the Maori to the mysterious Easter Islanders, in order to impart a feeling to the audience that they are participating in a story with its roots in reality, much as was the audience of the Indiana Jones films. Taking its influence from this region, and not from the more traditional Romano-Greek or Judeo-Christian roots, also avoids offending the usual lobby groups. However, this does not mean that it will offend any Polynesian audience. The terminology and mythology is sufficiently far removed from any one cultural root to avoid this too. So, did it work?
Oh my goodness gracious, no.
Of particular concern to the Maori was the use of the word Tohunga, which means healer, expert or priest, to refer to the helpless villagers who need saving, and there were concerns that LEGO would attempt to trademark the term due to the title of an upcoming Game Boy Advance game. For what it's worth, the case never reached a courtroom, with LEGO meeting with Maori representatives for advice and consultation, retiring certain words that didn't reflect their true meaning, and inventing new names for characters going forward rather than borrowing from real-world languages. However, despite LEGO's methods and the intended pushback, the intended effect was achieved. Bionicle already felt different from other LEGO themes, but the Polynesian influences combined with the backstory of the characters being conveyed as legend added something akin to spirituality in the theme, which made it unique. In these early years, to me it seemed ambiguous as to whether Matanui was an actual being or a metaphor for things being good in the world, with the imagery in the movies convincing me more of the latter. This too would be answered eventually. At the time, only Star Wars had anything that felt similar to me with the Force. Obviously it's unethical of a company to use words of cultural or religious significance to sell children toys, but it's something that absolutely worked, with Bionicle's profits helping to save the company from its financial troubles, and it's difficult to pick apart from the early years of the story. Returning to the online game, you travel around the island helping resolve issues in each village. All the stories centre on the Matoran and Taraga, and each land has its own unique feel and soundscape. A detail I love is how much of the world's technology and creatures feel like they're built out of LEGO Technic elements, even if a set of them was never released in reality. Like the Mahi. Look at these things, they're adorable! No physical set of them ever existed, and I believe the geometry of the actual Matoran arm used as the forehead wouldn't work, but it looks like it could be built and that it belongs in the universe. You'll also find examples of this with the lifting on Okoro and the boat that takes you between Taraga and Pauahi. Whilst focused on the Matoran, the Toa do appear in the game, but only in the cutscenes and not speaking a word. The exception is Pahatu, Tower of Stone and legit the best one, who you control in a minigame and who speaks to you briefly. 10+ Studios, who made the game, also had to contend with a no violence edict from LEGO. We were faced with conflicting directives, and in the end the marketing teams won out. The weapons could only be referred to as tools. And to quote Naomi Clark, "Tools? Yeah right, tools of destruction." This forced the team to get creative in constructing exciting action for the Toa's brief appearances. Highlights including Anua and Liwa's fight hidden by flashes and shadows, and Kopaka's fight against a Muaka, only striking the creature while using the Mask of Invisibility. These fun bursts of action towards the end of most chapters made every interaction with the Toa feel that much more special, rewarding the time you spent sorting out the island's problems and stopping everyone you meet for a chinwag. All of this would surely make an audience keen to play the final adventure for the Toa in the PC game when that eventually released. Unfortunately for LEGO, it never did. Multiple reasons have been given over the years for its cancellation, but all that's important for our discussion today is that it was. The game had been planned to depict the end of the 2001 storyline with the final battle between the Makuta and the 6 Toa. Obviously, this would now need to be shown somewhere else. The first comic of the following year would include a text summary of the storyline, but something else needed to be done in the short term. And wouldn't you know it, the Bionicle website already had a game with assets for the 6 Toa. After sorting out all the village's various problems, your character is tasked to lead a company to the island's great temple, the Kininui. After assembling a group of oddballs the various Turaga decide they can spare, you meet up with the Toa, with most speaking for the first time all game. Gali, the Toa of Water, establishes a mental link with you, somehow, enabling you to view the Toa's exploits as they enter the Makuta's lair. I'll be honest, at this point the lore and the atmosphere completely overtake the gameplay, which just becomes throwing discs at various Rahi to break up the story, although there is a neat cutscene at the end as all the Matoran come together. Meanwhile, under the surface, as had been teased in the comic, the Toa merged to form the Toa Kaita. Something I wish I could show off in reality, but I have the wrong toys to do it. Doing battle with the man-ass crabs. Eventually, the evil of Makuta's lair is too much for the Kaita, leading them to return to their original form, and Gali imploring you to seek them out. After solving an unfinished puzzle from earlier, you finally get a glimpse of yourself and wander through Makuta's lair, catching up with the Toa as they finally encounter Makuta? When I was a kid, this legitimately blew my mind, made all the cooler by his eventual fight with the Toa in his true form. After a really cool and atmospheric teaser for the following year, you again meet up with Vakama, your Turaga, on the Tawahi beach. He finally gives you your backstory, including your name, and how it relates to that Game Boy Advance game that had its name changed and that I haven't covered because I never played it. There's a few things I quite like about presenting the ending as part of the online game. Firstly, getting the final end to the 2001 story feels like a just reward for all the preceding gameplay. I can't imagine anything else sufficing really. Secondly, as much as I love the art style from the comics, I much prefer the style of the online game, and there's a great sense of motion and speed in the final battle that I think you'd struggle to get out of the same story told as a still image. Thirdly, structuring the ending this way allows the online game to make great use of its best asset, the Matoran. At this point, the only Matoran toys that have been released were the promotional sets for McDonald's, one for each village. Only the Toa, Turaga and Rahi saw a wide release in actual factual toy stores. In the comic, you only get to see Matoro, the Kokoro villager, briefly as he escorts Kapaka to Nuju, the Turaga, for his village. The story document lists provisional details for 12 Matoran characters, and they do get the lion's share of the dialogue here, which, to be fair, is more than they were getting anywhere else. But the online game creates several new characters to fill out the world, most having some fun character quirk. Even the background characters who you can't properly interact with have some memorable lines. These kind of gags end up hidden throughout the game. My favourite is probably this one hidden in Matoran script, advertising Midak's crustacean transport solution, i.e. taxi crabs. The whole world feels alive and fleshed out in a way it didn't in the comics, with the industry of each town explained as well. I also quite like that the online game shows the Matoran can, to some degree, fend for themselves. Yes, they're outclassed against organised attacks from Makuta, but they brave hostile environments, take to the air against the Nui Rama. They even try and trap a Toa when they don't know what the Toa actually are. It feels more interesting than presenting them as simply meek or helpless. This also serves to make the Toa's brief appearances throughout all the more impressive in context, heightening the impact of their confrontation at the end of the game. Given the disruption of their intended release plan, it's impressive that the 2001 story ended up being told in such an engaging and cohesive manner. It demonstrated to LEGO the power of the internet in selling their toys, and laid the groundwork for future stories. The ending of the online game had teased a new enemy, and kids wouldn't have to wait long to see them in action. 2002 saw the release of the Bowrock. These were super cool. They could fling their heads forward when the elastic band still worked. They could fling out their brains like that, their Krana brains, and they could roll up into little balls like that. This is in fact why I first bought one. It reminded me of a droidica. Rather than the Makuta's attacks on the Matoran, the Bowrock operated in swarms to attack their settlements and the island itself, ignoring Matoran and Toa alike unless they interfered, which again would be explained in 6 years' time. In the second year, the story was delivered in a slightly different way. The comics continued, with the new storyline beginning in issue 4. With no tentpole game to be cancelled this year, the story presented was more in-depth, following the Toa struggle to collect the Krana and confront the Borok's 2 Bara queens, as well as what happens when one of them falls to the power of the Krana. If I had a quid for every time Leo lost his mask. The same overall tone is retained from the first year, with more opportunities for the Toa to interact with each other. The first issue covering this storyline, issue 4, introduces the new enemies attacking Tokoro, and the 6-phase version you can collect, out in all good toy stores for £4.99. Whilst issue 5 depicts an involved battle against a group of Tanok as Kapaka informs Tahu of an important discovery. The story then moves towards the end of the Borok storyline for the next 3 issues, with an epilogue after that. The 6 issues were spread over the course of a year, with months between each, helping the story feel less rushed. Delving into the conclusion of the Borok story arc in the comic helps give it some of the narrative weight it was lacking in the first year of the theme, with these events not being directly portrayed in any other form of media this year. The comic feels the better fit for portraying the final battle as well. Whereas the battle with Makuta highlighted his shapeless abstract form and the complex movements therein, the battle with the Bara Queens is between 2 parties each possessed of actual bodies, most of the combat consisting of blasting energy bolts either through the Toa's own tools, or via their Exo-Toa armour that each wears only for this scene costing you 25 quid each! Ouch! Bahatu and Onward toys can't even wear them due to their unusual construction. Regardless, the point is, blasting elemental laser beams at each other is well suited to still images. You don't need animation to convey rapid changes in location within the space. At the end of the battle, our 6 Toa heroes are transformed via energized protodermis, don't ask, into new, slightly redesigned versions, which would soon be hitting your toy stores for an additional £4.99 each, adjusted for inflation about double that today, and it is only just hitting me now how much it would have cost to get everything at the time once you factor in the larger sets like the Bara Queens, $49.99 at the time, equal to $93.50 now. The comic wasn't the only place of Bionicle stories being told that year. Whilst there was no new game from Templar Studios, they did produce animations in the same style to portray the events of the Borok invasion as the Matorans saw them. 2002 was my introduction to the Bionicle storyline, and heading to the Bionicle websites, these animations were presented akin to news stories, with Takua, the protagonist of the previous year's game, reporting on events. Whilst Templar's focus had always been on the Matoran, that got taken up a gear this year, with no Toa appearing, except Bahatu, and even then only for one brief chapter. Whilst the comic quickly moves away from the Borok attack in favour of introducing the Barag, the animations show how much the Borok actually affect the Matoran villages, with the inhabitants of Pokoro even turning up at Garkoro as refugees towards the end of the year, and Matoran from Ta and Onukoro sent for the village's defence. However, as with Year 1, the animations are able to show how the Matoran learn and adapt to the Borok's tactics. The key example of this would be New Invention Saves Onokoro, where a New Invention saves Onokoro. 3 Matoran are trapped with a deactivated Borok. Only a Borok's Krana is truly alive, the body itself being a bunch of spare parts. With this in mind, inventor Naparu uses these parts to create a new machine, the Boxsaw, capable of allowing Matoran to hold their own against the Borok, and only £12.99 from all good toy shops. This is probably the coolest toy commercial I've ever seen, ending with the Boxsaw and a swarm of Garlock about to do battle. Most of the animations finish like this, setting up conflict and leaving you to imagine the ending. In a nice bit of crossover, the Boxsaw even briefly appears in this year's comic. Future animations demonstrate it being used to free Lakoro, with the Matoran enacting a scheme to counter its weaknesses in dense jungle, and their attempted use at Garkoro before the Borok take advantage of their environment. The Garkoro animations end up being a three-parter at the end of the run, with villagers from Garpo, Ta and Onukoro present as a group of Parak overwhelm the village. It really feels like a proper epic finale, at least within the confines of these animations. Admittedly, the ending kinda feels like it comes out of nowhere, but it sets up an important element of the next year's storyline, and does make sense with the added context of the comics. Mostly. The animations also deepen the relationships between the Matoran. For example, Maku and Huki clearly like each other and reference each other in the first year's game, but in the animations you see instances of the two actually interacting. It's also sweet. By contrast, the comics tend to default to the Toa being snarky and slightly dysfunctional with each other, which is fun but can get a little wearing if you end up binging them. There's a little of that in the animations too, but each of the featured Matoran end up feeling more distinct and rounded characters by comparison. 2002 is, for me, the most coherent year in terms of how the story is told. By focusing on different aspects of the Borok invasion, and with the comic having a fully fledged story arc of its own, the story felt deeper this year than before, with each strand strengthening the other. The hardships of the Matoran make the Toa's efforts to defeat the Balrog all the more heroic, and the difficulties the Toa have fighting swarms of Balrog in turn make the Matoran's efforts at defense all the more impressive. The continuity between each story strand is strong, but with neither feeling like it's duplicating the other. For example, Lakora is revealed taken over in the comics with Liwa falling too. Liwa's rescue occurs in the comic, and it is referenced in the animation depicting Lakora's liberation. I like this approach. Each story strand feels complete in and of itself, and the differing focus of each medium makes the Balrog invasion feel like a truly large event that we only get to see snapshots of, something that affects all of Matoran society rather than just the heroic Toa. Talking of which, they've just been upgraded into the Toa Nuva. Let's see what 2003 has in store for them. 2003 was split up into two distinct story arcs, with the first focusing on the Toa Nuva as they went up against the Balrog Cow, more intelligent and more powerful Balrog variants. A cynic would say that LEGO was selling you 6 of the same toy again with only 2 new parts and some minor colour variations. My reaction at the time was something more akin to,
"But she's got a new hat."
So you remember that weird symbol that turned up at the end of the online animations? Well, each Toa has one, and it turns out those hold the key to the Toa Nuva's power, for some reason, and that if you remove them from their shrines, the Toa lose their powers for some reason. And if you were to place them on the cube that appeared by the Balrog Queens for some reason, it would free them from their imprisonment. Somehow. To the best of my knowledge, this one never did get adequately explained within the story itself. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The comics had another 6 issues in 2003, but split 3 apiece between the 2 storylines. As such, the Balrog Carl's story feels less in depth than the preceding year's effort. The Balrog Carl's plan is more complex than the Balrogs in that they actually have one, but they're already halfway through by the time they make their first proper appearance. The only thing they need to do is actually find where the Balrog are imprisoned, with them achieving this halfway through the second issue. Admittedly, this does keep the pace up, and you're not wondering for ages why the Balrog Cow are having such difficulty finding the Balrog when their lair is so near the hives which presumably the Balrog Cow have recently come from. It's nice seeing the Toa struggle for a change, but it does lead to all of their interactions with the Balrog Cow feeling very samey. Pahato and Onua do get one victory in, but even now I'm still not entirely sure of the mechanics of this. Apparently Tanok Cow gets paralysing flashbacks to the Matanui disco every time he sees a mirror ball. Even once we get to the Balrog Queens again, a key part of the storyline relies on Tahu having access to the Mask of Time, a collectible intended to be given away with the cancelled PC game, unique in story, and which he wasn't depicted collecting until after this comic had been released. The solution to the crisis ends up being to channel their powers, that they don't have right now, through their symbols, feeding them into the Balrog Cow. Somehow. That seems to be the best word for this story arc. Leading to arguably the best part of the story, as the Balrog Cow get destroyed by their own powers in visually spectacular ways. All of that said, the comic is exciting moment to moment, and even begins to engage in the animation's habit of setting up conflict and leaving the resolution for you to play out. Talking of the animations, there seems to be a disconnect between them and the comics this year. The Balrog Carl storyline was conceived by Greg Farshty, who logically concocted a storyline that focused mostly on the Toa Nuva. That makes sense, the Toa are the heroes of the story, they're the toys you can actually buy, so of course they're going to be the main attraction. But years 1 and 2 had the Toa protecting the Matoran from attack, enabling easily writers to bring the Matoran into stories if they so wished. With the Balrog Cow's attack being on the Toa themselves, it's much more difficult to organically work the Matoran in. Nevertheless, the Templar Studios team gave it a jolly good go, at least at first. The first episode sees Takua and Jala returning to Takoro, reuniting with Takua's pet taxi crab Puku, and catching up with Turaga Fakama. You'd be forgiven for thinking the Toa weren't involved at all until the end, where Tahu confronts Tanok Kao. We have the prerequisite scene of Tahu losing his powers, but also a scene immediately after where Tahu talks with Fakama about it. We don't get this for any other Toa. By the time they meet in the comics, they've already long lost their power. So I'm glad it's Tahu, the most arrogant and stubborn of them, that gets an on-screen reaction. As the de facto main character of the animations, Takua joins Tahu as chronicler, with Jala joining them too. We get moments of Tahu meeting up with Liwa and Pahatu, but the story abruptly jumps ahead to all 6 having joined the party in the episode ending. The beginning of the next entry feels almost as abrupt. Not only is the episode only 2 minutes long as compared to the 6 and 8 minutes of the previous 2 installments, the dialogue switches to past tense narration as opposed to the usual present day dialogue. The first minute covers the same story as the final comic, with Tahu using the Mask of Time and the Toa overloading the Balrog Car with their powers. I suppose it makes sense to detail the ending of the story for those who didn't read the comics, but the story jumps from inciting incident to conclusion with not a moment between them. It feels odd in this context. It's nice to see the fate of the Balrog Car in motion, but the animations here don't feel as grand or as impressive as the comic art at this time. In previous years, the comics and animations covering different events in the same story meant you avoided the trap of having to compare different versions of the same event, and it's a shame this happened here. What's more, Takua and Jala completely disappear from the story without explanation. They don't appear in the comics for this story arc, and the comic only starts the Toa and Barok Kar's conflict with the 6 Toa united, so there's no contradiction. The first 2 animations presumably take place between the first 2 Barok Kar comics. But it's definitely a choice to have your viewpoint characters vanish without a trace. They do appear at the end as the first Matorans to undergo rebuilding. These Matorans in their new form would soon join villagers from Gar, Ko and Pokoro as the first actual retail Matoran sets, excluding the Paru in the Boxer and Hafu in the Power Pack, selling for $1.99 each. Bargain! These new toys were admittedly much more posable and playable than the original Matorans, so are superior on that basis. But they don't have the charm of the originals somehow. They're less cute, they're less underdogs, which kind of makes their moments of heroism less impressive. At least to me, I might be overthinking this slightly. Takua and Jala didn't get individual $1.99 releases, but ended up being released in sets promoting the next big storyline. 11 years before the actual LEGO movie, Bionicle Mask of Light was LEGO's first actual full-length film. The film tells the story of Takua and Jala discovering the titular Mask of Light, and following a prophecy from the Turaga heading on a quest to find the 7th Toa. Meanwhile, the Makuta makes his return, sending out his 6 Rakshi to make sure the Toa of Light is never discovered. The Rakshi were great toys. They were powered by these Krata, these slug things that they had in the back. They tower over the other toys that have been released thus far. They fight with a staff, which is always a bit of a cheat code for me in terms of how cool I think a character is. And they represent a major evolution in Bionicle technology in that they have knees. The CGI renders of the characters were redesigned from the toys so that everyone could share in this advancement, as well as elbows, necks, and in most but not all cases, mouths. The redesigns are a mixed bag overall. The Toa come off the best, clearly resembling their toy cells but streamlined slightly for the screen, whilst the Matoran to me don't strongly look like either of their toys thus far. It could be worse though, the bodies of the Turaga end up being based on the Borok Var instead. It's not only the characters' designs that have changed, a few of the characters' personalities have undergone change too. The Toa Nuva are, yet again, going through one of their uncooperative periods. To be fair, this dysfunction has been a consistent thing for this team, but they've just come off an arc where they learnt the power of unity after mistakenly thinking they were powerful enough to not need each other, which seems to be happening again.
Their recent victories are a blessing, but they've forgotten how they need each other.
Side note, it was a bit odd when I was a kid hearing these guys with American accents. Like, I get it, I get why, and I got used to it, but pretty much no one except Vakama, Pahatu, and maybe Onawa sounded anything close to how I imagined them before the film. Anyway, it's not only the Toa. Takua retains his adventurous spirit, but has become slightly more reckless and irresponsible than usual. Again, although the recklessness has been a part of his character before, the lack of responsibility hasn't, aside from a brief allusion to events way before the first online game begins. What's more, Takua and Jala bicker a lot more with each other than they have done before. After Takua travels the island in the online game, he's already earned Jala's trust, and the two have few crosswords afterwards. This is kinda a symptom of doing the first movie in year 3 of the storyline, particularly when the third year ended up being a sort of mini conclusion of sorts. The film had a larger potential audience and purely kids interested enough in their particular toys to go to LEGO's website and sign up for their free magazine. For anyone coming into the story at this point, you needed to establish the key relationships these characters had with each other, even if that means a little regression in some cases. This also ends up a little jarring with the other media this arc, not regressing the characters in this way. The Toa of the comics get on much better than in the film, for example. In fact, the film's existence ends up affecting the other media significantly. Unlike the previous arc, the film's events are basically left untouched in the other formats, excluding the appearance of Takanuva in the comics, which briefly and selectively quotes the film for that moment alone. Not treading on the toes of the films leads to a little timeline weirdness. For example, in the film, Pahatu and Onawa are trapped when Onokoro caves in after their first encounter with the Rakshi.
What is Rakshi?
Those!
They only reappear at the conclusion, their dialogue implying the other Toa were unaware of their survival and that their rescue was recent.
Brothers, we thought we lost you.
And you might have, if it weren't for our icy friend.
Meanwhile, in Comic Land, Pahatu and Onawa meet Wenawa to check out his bug collection, meet with the other 4 Toa, and then the final battle with the Rakshi kind of happens until Takanuva arrives. It doesn't quite gel. Bionicle would have films again in future, and they generally got better about steering clear of the film's key events, but in this year the balance wasn't quite struck. Mind you, the comics got off lightly. The Templar Studios team finally got to create another game, Matanui Online Game 2, The Final Chronicle. There's a few changes this time though. You don't play as Takua, but as Harley, a character introduced towards the end of the Bow-Rock arc, and who is a key supporting character in the Mask of Light movie. You help her travel the island to acquire skills so she can become the island's Coley champion, as in her first scene of the movie. There's a few changes to the gameplay this time around. Instead of first person, the game is in third person so you can see your character. This massively impacts the movement. Travelling around Matanui in the original game takes a lot of travelling and a lot of screens, but moving between them requires only a single click to load the next one. The island feels vast, but not overwhelming to travel. In the second game though, you have to wait for your character to run across every single screen. In so many of these, there's nothing to actually do. It's literally just an enforced wait. The dialogue trees have changed as well. The original game gave you a maximum of 4 responses to a character's dialogue. This could make conversation limited, but on the plus side, it was clear what options you'd already tried and easy to find information you've forgotten. In the second game, dialogue options pile up over multiple screens, each loading more responses to get added to the pile. It's very easy to forget where you heard information that might now be crucial, not helped by the overly complex trading system in Garkoro where you start the game, doubly not helped by the fact that people who you have to trade with keep running around town, meaning you have to wait for ages in their huts for them to get back. Like, I know it's a bit odd that Vakama keeps saying he's been in contact with the other Turaga in the first game when he never seems to move from that fire, but at least I know where to find him when I jolly well need him. Honestly, if I never see more flax or cowrie shells, it'll be too soon. Whilst Garkoro's trading system is overdeveloped, the same can't be said for anywhere else. In fact, after Garkoro, there seems to be very little to do. You end up playing Coley at every village, and then after a thrilling seconds-long glimpse at Arakshi, you have to do another fetch quest across the island to gather these orbs for some reason, and then you're rewarded with a vague and ambiguous cutscene, and then just a bit of Nakama talking. She basically just says there's a job opening for the island historian, so she'd better be writing this all down, and to get ready to board a boat for Metronui. Yeah, that sounds about right. I'll be honest, I've never been able to beat this game without cheating the numbers. Whilst the world of Matanui feels bigger than before, it feels shallower, and the prize for winning feels insignificant compared to the effort it requires. This would be Templar's last work on the series in a narrative format, though they would return for the excellent Valky animations in 2004, presented as in-universe propaganda. With both the comics and the online game affected by the existence of the movie, the whole Mask of Light story ends up riding on the quality of said movie. And fortunately, I think they pull it off for the most part. Let's be clear, they didn't achieve cinematic perfection here. They wouldn't achieve that until the following year's Legends of Metru Nui. The film has an odd relationship with prior stories, getting some bits of continuity right.
Ever windfly a cuckoo bird?
I've been a second, but I never flown one myself.
And completely whiffing it on other bits.
None have breached Tokoro's gates before, and none shall this day.
And while the calling your attacks thing works in print in a comic where you might need to clarify what particular energy bolt is doing what, that doesn't translate too well to animation and sounds nowhere near as cool.
Lava!
Water!
And ice.
It's a movie for kids, it's a movie for kids, it's a movie for kids. But the movie follows in the footsteps of all my favourite Bionicle stories thus far and keeps the Matoran squarely in its sights, focusing the story around Takua and Jala's quest for the 7th Toa, and giving Harley some important scenes. Takua does regress somewhat as a character to start his arc, but it's a good arc about accepting personal responsibility, leading to his eventual destiny as the 7th Toa. Spoilers, by the way. Centering this story around Takua essentially raises him from being the main character of the animations to the main character of the story overall. This does lead to the 6 Toa Nuva feeling somewhat sidelined in their own movie, but each gets their own moment to shine, and if you want more from them, may I refer you back to story arcs 1, 2 and 3. Whilst Matoran society in the film doesn't feel quite as developed as it did in the original online game, it does feel grander. Matanui itself feels bigger, and scenes like the Coley game and the meeting at Onokoro see more Matoran present than in anything else before. The feel of small villages is gone, with each core seeming more like a town. They'll make her jump to city next year. As a conclusion of the first 3 years, the story feels like it has actual stakes. By movie's end, Takoro and Onokoro are both completely destroyed, never to be rebuilt. The Makuta is finally defeated, for now, and it lays the groundwork for the following year. However, the ending is odd, even if you've been following along. So, energized Prototermus turns the Makuta and Takanuva into this big bloke. Okay, fine, we've seen it turn the Toa into the Toa Nuva, I'll go with that. Makuta suddenly decides not to be Samadhi, still with you. There's this big door in this layer leading to salvation. I believe this got explained later, but a bit odd. Jala's heroic sacrifice gets undone. I guess we can transfer life force like it's the Rise of Skywalker. Door goes squish, leaving only Takanuva's mask. And then by saying the slogan we can bring him back to life? I mean, to be fair, they did foreshadow this about 30 seconds ago. Maybe Harley, Jala and Takanuva are some kind of triad in the three virtues. Still, if you think that's odd, wait until you see how the story progresses. Turns out the Turaga used to be Toa in a police state, then they got mutated by a bunch of insects, then a bunch of guys go on a quest because God is dying and get hit by lightning and have to fight a group of criminals led by the Bionicle equivalent of Spider's Man. Then they get mutated into fish people. Then the first bunch of heroes gets laser scopes and wings and give aerial piggyback rides to the locals, plus Takanuva is huge now. Then the devil takes over God's body and yeets him out into the universe where he lands on a planet and builds himself a new body to drop a moon on his old head. I think that just about sums it up. Bionicle continued on for 7 more years after the story set on the island of Matanui. And yet it's these first 3 years that keep pulling me back. Unavoidably, part of that is nostalgia, but I also think there is something to the story that is more engaging. It was only ever advertising for toys, but it was some incredibly effective advertising. In fact, it's still working. I myself didn't have a Pahatu or an Onewa when I was a kid. My sister had those ones. I've only got these in the past year because of their roles in the online story. What drew me in initially, beyond the toys obviously, was the mashup of tones and visuals present in this story. The blend of science fiction, superpowers, and exploring an unknown paradise with danger lurking anywhere was fuel for the imagination. But what kept me there, and what keeps me coming back, is the Matoran and their society. Whilst the Matoran remain important to the Bionicle story in later years, they decrease in prominence to being merely victims in need of rescue by the Toa, and few of their later appearances present a society as well developed or thought out as the ones of Matanui. The disconnect in what the Matoran could tell you and what the Turagas would only ever hint at kept the mystery going, like there was always something bigger to uncover. And boy was there. The Toa goodies fighting the various baddies was fun for a kid, but developing the Matoran helped give their conflicts weight, and having the primary character of the first 3 years be a Matoran enabled stories to be told from a variety of perspectives, enhanced by the formats chosen to tell them. Looking back, it's no wonder I got hooked on this world, and it doesn't surprise me that it remains of interest to me now. If you're interested in checking out the Bionicle story, head to the Biomedia Project website, where pretty much everything that can be archived has been. For the 2001 storyline, I'd recommend the online game. For the 2002 storyline, the online animations and the comics work in tandem. For the Borok Kao storyline, the comics are your best bet, and the Mask of Light movie to round things off. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.